One of the cool and interesting parts about Buddhist training is that when we engage in the traditional practices, the meditation, the chanting, the sutra study, etc., oftentimes we gain the knowledge and insight necessary to work through problems that we experience in daily life. Even though they seem unrelated, the traditional practices bring problems that we have to solve. And those learning to solve those problems help us solve other problems outside the temple. Case in point, an important part of Buddhist practice is seated meditation. It was what the Buddha was doing 2,600 years ago when he realized enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. So we follow in his example, sitting on the floor or on a cushion in a cross-legged position, back straight, chin slightly tucked, and we do our best to not move. The reason we don't move is because a still body helps us to realize a still mind. That said, if you wiggle a bit while you're on the cushion, it's not a big deal as long as you don't disturb the person next to you. And if it does start to become a disturbance, the worst that will happen is that a senior student will walk over and ask politely, "Would you like to use a chair?" That said, if you are striving to sit on the cushion in the cross-legged position as the Buddha did, you're going to run into some problems. It's not unlikely that you'll feel some discomfort in your quadriceps and your hamstrings, also in your lower back. The reason being, as Westerners, we generally sit in chairs. We don't sit on the floor or on the cushion like you generally see in other cultures. So those muscles are tight, they're weak, and they're just not used to that position. That said, what I've found is that once we're in position, one of the worst things you can do is to move around to try and find a better position when you experience discomfort. It's been my experience that when you're experiencing discomfort on the cushion, it's very unlikely you'll be able to wiggle just so to make the discomfort stop. It's best to just let it be. Just sit with the discomfort in your body, experience those physical sensations, and wait for the timer to go off. Now, obviously, there's some common sense here, and if we are in danger of physical injury, there's nothing wrong with asking for the chair I mentioned earlier. But we have to realize that discomfort is a part of the training, just like it's a part of daily life, and sometimes that discomfort is inescapable. The same goes for the discomfort we might experience in our minds during seated meditation. People often make the mistake of thinking that if we're doing it right, we are not supposed to think anything. We're supposed to have no thoughts. But the opposite is actually the reality. If you think about daily life, we experience so many distractions. Our phones, our laptops, conversations with friends. It's incredibly rare that we actually pay attention to what's going on in our minds. So if we're thinking about the weather or about work and we try to force ourselves to stop thinking, well, that just generates more thoughts. Again, the best thing we can do with the discomfort in our minds is to just let it be. Just breathe, relax, continue sitting in the position, and eventually what will happen is our bodies will get used to sitting like that, and the discomfort will go away, or at the very least become more manageable. Similarly, the discomfort in our minds as we stop feeding our thoughts with more thoughts like stop thinking, no, not again, why can't I do this better? If we just let it be, our thoughts will eventually calm down. They will relax, and we will experience a very calm, very meditative state. Now that's seated meditation, but what does that have to do with daily life? Well, it's been my experience that when people come to the Buddhist temple, they come there because they're in pain. They're suffering and they want the suffering to stop, which is 100% normal. The Buddha started this whole Buddhism thing because he was suffering and he took the vow that he would not get under get up from under the Bodhi tree until he found a way to end all sorrow. If we look at the other Buddhist patriarchs, Vasubandhu, Asanga, Dogen, Rinzai, same thing. They all have, frankly, fairly tragic backstories. They were suffering and they wanted the suffering to stop. And Buddhism, in its great wisdom and compassion, offers us many tools that allow us to do that. The Noble Eightfold Path, the Six Perfections, the Four Brahma Viharas, lots of tips and tricks that we can use that have been passed down for 2,600 years to help us avoid unnecessary suffering. That said, there are times in life where the best thing we can do is nothing. I'm not saying we should sit on the log. I'm not saying we shouldn't try. We all have bills to pay. We have people who are depending on us. We have to act. But if we have acted, and we've acted again and again, and it's just not working, we can't repair that relationship with a loved one. We can't get our boss to listen to us. We can't find a way to get to the store that doesn't end with us getting in a traffic jam. Well, maybe the best thing we can do is simply accept the situation as it is. In the same way we just continue sitting on the cushion, just let it be until our bodies and our minds relax. Sometimes in daily life, it's best to just let it be. Let the world be what it's going to be. Stop trying to fix it, because the more we wiggle around, the more we grab things and try to make them do what we want them to do. Yeah, sometimes that works to end suffering, but sometimes it just creates more suffering. And we must have the humility and the clear vision to know the difference. This is why seated meditation is so useful, because there are things you can do to make meditation more comfortable. You can get a new cushion, you can do some yoga stretches, you can avoid caffeine before you sit down to meditate. But once we're in the posture, we're there. And the best thing we can do is just keep sitting. Similarly, with daily life, there are things we can and should do to solve our problems. But if we've done all we can and the thing is still broken, well, the only thing we can do is let it be broken. And hopefully it will find some way in the future to fix it, or we'll be able to live with it the way that it is now. But by learning when it's necessary to just let things be, we'll avoid creating unnecessary suffering for ourselves and for others. Amitabha.